The rain slammed against the city like it was trying to wash Chicago away. Lightning tore through the sky, flashing across puddles and alley walls. In that chaos, a woman in a pale blue suit struggled to crawl across the wet pavement. Her heel snapped. Her phone slipped from her shaking hands, clattering into the gutter. She looked around, terrified. The alley stretched empty behind her, shadows flickering under the streetlight. Her voice broke through the sound of the storm. "Please, don't hurt me! I can't walk!" Her hair clung to her face, mascara running down her cheeks. The water soaked through her clothes, mixing with the dirt and fear on her skin. Her name was Victoria Hale, a woman used to boardrooms and luxury cars, not cold concrete and panic, but tonight, power meant nothing. Somewhere in the distance, footsteps echoed, closer, louder. She pressed her back against the wall, breathing fast, heart pounding like a trapped bird. The rain blurred everything, the world spinning between flashes of white light. "Who's there?" she whispered, voice trembling. No answer. Only the storm answering back, hissing through the alley. Her phone battery blinked red before fading to black. She was alone, stranded, her ankle throbbing with pain, the sound of approaching footsteps mixing with the roar of thunder. For the first time in years, Victoria felt small, helpless, and afraid of what might come out of the darkness. And then, through the curtain of rain, two shadows appeared. Rain splashed against the cracked sidewalks of Chicago, the kind that smelled like gasoline and old dreams. Through that restless storm, Daniel Carter held a small pink umbrella, barely big enough to cover him and his 7-year-old daughter Mia. Their shoes soaked through the puddles, but their laughter somehow cut through the thunder. "Daddy, you're getting wet again," Mia giggled, tilting the umbrella toward him. "That's okay," Daniel smiled, brushing water from her hair. "A little rain never hurt anyone. It just makes us shine brighter." She twirled, pretending to dance like she did in her ballet class, her bright yellow raincoat spinning under the dim streetlight. He watched her with quiet pride, as if the whole storm existed only to frame this one small moment of joy. Daniel's life wasn't easy. He worked long hours fixing electrical lines, juggling bills, cooking dinners, and trying to make a childhood for his daughter that felt safe. But with Mia's hand in his, every hardship felt smaller. She was the reason he smiled at the end of every long day. As they turned onto a narrow alley that would shorten their walk home, the sound of the rain changed. It was softer there, echoing between brick walls. Daniel adjusted his jacket and guided Mia forward. Then, something caught his attention. A faint sound. A voice carried by the rain. It was weak, frightened. "Please, don't hurt me." Daniel stopped. His instincts sharpened, his eyes narrowing toward the dark end of the alley. Mia squeezed his hand. "Daddy, did you hear that?" she whispered. He nodded slowly, shielding her behind him. The sound came again, mixed with the rumble of thunder. Someone was there. Someone who needed help. Daniel looked down at his daughter. "Stay close to me." "Sweetheart," Mia nodded, clutching the umbrella tighter as they stepped forward into the shadows, unaware that the next few moments would change both their lives forever. The closer they walked, the clearer the sound became. It was not the storm. It was a woman's voice, trembling between fear and pain. Daniel's eyes adjusted to the dim light. At the end of the alley, beside a dumpster, he saw her. A woman in a pale blue suit, soaked from head to toe, one shoe missing, clutching her ankle. For a moment, he froze. The scene looked like trouble, a stranger in the dark, an injured woman, the kind of situation most people would walk past. His instinct told him to protect his daughter and keep moving. But then Mia tugged at his sleeve, her voice soft yet steady. "Daddy, she's hurt." Daniel looked down at her. The innocence in her eyes cut through his hesitation. He sighed quietly and took a cautious step forward. "Ma'am," he called out over the rain. "Are you all right?" The woman flinched, her eyes wide with panic. "Please, don't come closer," she whispered. "I can't walk." Daniel raised his hand slightly, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "It's okay. We're not going to hurt you. My name's Daniel, and this is my daughter, Mia. We just want to help." Mia stepped out from behind her father, her small voice breaking through the storm. I can call 911, ma'am. My dad taught me how. Victoria hesitated. The child's presence, the kindness in her eyes, softened something inside her. She nodded weakly, her lips trembling. Thank you. Mia opened her father's phone with practiced hands, dialing emergency services. Daniel crouched beside the woman, keeping a careful distance. Her ankle was badly swollen, the skin already turning purple. You did the right thing staying still, he said quietly. Help's on the way. Victoria tried to smile, but her voice cracked. I didn't think anyone would stop. Daniel glanced at his daughter. She didn't give me much choice. For the first time that night, Victoria's lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. The sound of sirens began to rise in the distance, mixing with the rain. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple act of stopping would become the moment that changed all three of their lives. Rain kept falling in silver lines, washing down the walls around them. The faint wail of sirens echoed somewhere far away. Still a few minutes out, Daniel knelt beside Victoria, keeping his voice calm, his movements steady. Mia stood close, clutching the pink umbrella that sagged under the weight of the storm. Try to stay still, Daniel said softly. Your ankle looks pretty bad. Victoria tried to laugh, but it came out like a shiver. I've closed multi-million-dollar deals, managed entire corporations, but I can't even walk across a parking garage without falling apart. Daniel looked up at her, rain dripping from his hair. Even the strongest people fall sometimes, he said. That's what makes us human. She studied him through the haze of rain and pain. His jacket was soaked, his boots muddy, but there was something about his calmness that steadied her. He wasn't treating her like a CEO or a stranger. He was treating her like a person. I have employees, she said quietly, clients who depend on me. But when I was sitting there, trying to call someone for help, I realized I didn't have a single name to dial. Not one. Mia tilted her head. Not even a friend? Victoria's throat tightened. The little girl's question hit harder than she expected. Not really, I guess. I've been too busy being important. Daniel smiled. The kind of smile that came from a place of understanding. You're not alone tonight, he said gently. Everyone needs a hand sometimes. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Victoria blinked, and a tear slid down her cheek, mixing with the raindrops. She had spent years building an empire so big that she forgot what it felt like to have someone stay beside her without wanting something in return. Thank you, she whispered. You didn't have to stop. Daniel shrugged lightly. Maybe not, but I want my daughter to see that we don't walk past people who need help. That's how the world gets colder. Mia squeezed her father's arm and smiled at Victoria. Daddy says, helping is what makes us strong. Victoria's lips trembled again, and this time she didn't fight it. For the first time in years, she let her guard down. The power suit, the reputation, the long hours, all of it felt meaningless compared to this simple kindness in the rain. In that quiet moment, the distance between two worlds shrank. The woman who had everything and the man who had very little shared something real, something that money could never buy. The sirens grew louder now, red and blue lights flashing at the far end of the alley. As the ambulance pulled closer, Victoria looked at Daniel and his daughter again. Their faces were illuminated by the pulsing lights, and she realized how different they were from everyone in her world. They didn't care who she was. They cared that she was hurting, and that, somehow, was exactly what she had been missing. 3 days had passed since the storm. Chicago was calm again. The streets washed clean as if nothing had happened, but Daniel still thought about that night. The sound of the rain, the trembling voice of the woman in blue, the look in her eyes when she realized someone had stopped. He was cooking dinner when his phone rang. Unknown number? For a second, he almost ignored it. Then something made him answer. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice, softer this time, like she had been carrying words that weighed too much to say. Daniel Carter? It's Victoria Hale. Daniel set down the pan. Surprised. How are you doing? You all right? I'm in the hospital, she said. Broken ankle. Doctors say I'll recover soon. Her voice cracked slightly. I wanted to thank you again. You and your daughter. He smiled, leaning against the counter. You don't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same. There was silence. Then she spoke again. Quieter. No, they wouldn't. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? The security footage from the parking garage. She continued. It showed 7 people walking past me that night. 7. They saw me sitting there, trying to move, crying for help, and they just kept walking. Her breath caught on the other end of the line. Only you stopped. Daniel said nothing for a moment. He could hear the weight in her voice, the disbelief, the kind of realization that changes something inside a person. I've been thinking a lot, she said, about that night, about you and your little girl. She paused, then added in a voice that trembled between strength and regret. I've spent 15 years building a company. Daniel, but I've never built a life. Her confession hung in the air. The sound of the hospital monitor beeped faintly behind her words. I've achieved everything people dream about, she went on. A corner office, recognition, power, but none of it matters if you don't have someone who cares enough to stop when you fall. Daniel exhaled slowly. He didn't know what to say, so he spoke simply. Maybe it's not too late to start building the other kind. Victoria let out a quiet, shaky laugh. You make it sound easy. It's not, Daniel said, but the hard things are usually the ones worth doing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt strange, heavy yet peaceful. Then Victoria said softly, Your daughter? She looked at me like I was worth helping. I haven't seen that look in years. She has a good heart, Daniel said. Got it from her mom. Victoria's voice softened. She reminded me of my daughter, Grace. She's 8, lives with her father. I've been too busy to be her mother. Daniel didn't respond right away. He could hear the guilt in her words, the kind that comes only when someone realizes what truly matters. I don't want to keep living like this, she whispered. That night made me see what I've become. Successful, but empty. Daniel's tone stayed calm but firm. Then change it. You can always choose again. On the other end of the line, Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, Maybe I will. When the call ended, Daniel stood in the quiet apartment, phone still in his hand. The sound of Mia humming from her room drifted through the hallway. He looked toward her door and smiled faintly. Somewhere across the city, a woman who had once measured her worth in numbers was learning that sometimes it takes one act of kindness to rewrite an entire life. The days after the call felt quieter for both of them. For Victoria, recovery meant more than healing a broken ankle. It meant facing the silence she had ignored for years, the silence of an empty penthouse, of unread messages from her daughter's school, of a life that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow when the lights went out. One afternoon, as Daniel returned from a repair job, his phone buzzed again. The same voice, calmer now, but still uncertain. Hi, Daniel. It's Victoria. I wanted to thank you in person. He hesitated for a second, then agreed to meet her at a small cafe near the hospital. When he arrived, she was already there, dressed simply, a walking boot still strapped around her ankle. Gone was the icy CEO aura. Instead, she looked almost human, almost fragile. Coffee? She asked with a small smile. Sure, he said, sitting across from her. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I keep thinking about what you said, about starting over. I want to learn how to be present for my daughter. I just don't know where to start. Daniel looked at her for a moment. You start by showing up. Kids don't need perfection. They just need you. She nodded, staring into her cup as if searching for courage at the bottom. Grace doesn't even talk to me anymore. She lives with her dad. Every time I call, it feels like she's talking to a stranger. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Then stop calling her like a CEO. Call her like a mom. Tell her something real. Ask about her favorite color, her music, the small things. That's where connection starts. Victoria smiled faintly. You make it sound simple. It isn't, Daniel said, but it's honest. They sat there for a while, Two people from opposite worlds sharing quiet understanding. She had money but no peace. He had little, but enough love to make a home feel whole. When they stood to leave, Victoria reached into her purse. "Daniel, I've been thinking, my company is starting a new community program to support working parents. We need someone who understands what that really means. Someone like you." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not looking for charity." Her expression softened. "It's not charity. It's recognition. You helped me see what matters. I want you to help others see it too." He studied her face for a moment and saw that she meant it. There was no pride there now, only sincerity. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I'll think about it." When he walked home that evening, the sky was clear. He found Mia waiting on the steps, coloring with chalk. She looked up, grinning. "You look happy, Daddy." He chuckled. "Just met someone who's trying to figure out how to be a better mom." Mia tilted her head. "Did you help her?" "I think we're helping each other." Across the city, Victoria stared out her window, phone in hand. Her thumb hovered over her daughter's number. For once, she didn't rehearse what to say. She just pressed call. Spring came quietly to Chicago. The snow melted from the rooftops, and sunlight spilled into the glass towers that once defined Victoria Hale's world. But her world was no longer made of deadlines and deals. It was now made of mornings that began with phone calls to her daughter, and evenings spent planning the next one. It started small. A text message that said, "Good night, sweetheart." Then a video call where Grace barely spoke. Then another, where she smiled for 2 seconds longer than before. Each moment, fragile and uncertain, was a victory. Victoria had changed her schedule. She no longer stayed in her office until midnight. She stopped saying, "Just one more meeting." For the first time in years, she turned down a major deal, simply to catch a flight to see her daughter's school recital. Her assistant thought she was joking, but she wasn't. The night of the recital, the school gym was crowded, filled with parents holding flowers and phones. Victoria sat alone in the back row, clutching a small bouquet of white lilies. She felt strangely nervous. It had been years since she had been just another parent in the crowd. Then the music started. Tiny ballerinas in pastel dresses tiptoed onto the stage. And there she was, Grace, her daughter. The little girl she had missed growing up. Grace's hair was tied back with a pink ribbon, her face glowing under the soft stage light. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. For the first time, she didn't see a stranger. She saw the child who once used to wait by the door, hoping her mother would come home early. When Grace spotted her in the crowd, their eyes met. For a moment, time stopped. The music faded behind the pounding of Victoria's heart. Grace's lips trembled, but then she smiled. A small, hesitant smile that carried years of forgiveness inside it. Tears welled in Victoria's eyes. She didn't wipe them away. She didn't care who saw. She had spent a lifetime holding everything together. But at that moment, she let it all go. Every missed birthday, every broken promise, every night she chose her career over her child. All of it poured out through those tears. After the recital, parents gathered outside the hall. Victoria waited by the door, unsure if Grace would come. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the flowers. Then, from the crowd, a small voice, "Mom?" Victoria turned. Grace stood there, still in her ballet dress, clutching her shoes. The word hit her like a wave. Mom. She had almost forgotten what it sounded like. "I liked your dancing," Victoria said softly. "You were beautiful." Grace looked at her for a long moment. "You came." "I told you I would." The girl stepped closer. "You used to say that before, and you never did." Victoria's eyes filled again. "I know, and I'm sorry, baby. I was wrong." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, Grace dropped her shoes and ran forward, wrapping her arms around her mother. Victoria froze for a second, then pulled her close, her hands trembling as she held the child she once lost to time. That embrace lasted longer than any business deal, any applause, any award. It was quiet, but it was everything. Later that night, Victoria called Daniel. "She hugged me," she said through tears. "My daughter hugged me." Daniel's voice was warm, proud. "I told you, showing up changes everything." Outside her window, the city lights shimmered on the river. For the first time, Victoria didn't feel trapped by them. She felt free. 2 years later, the city looked different, not because the buildings had changed, but because the people inside them had. For Victoria Hale, life had finally found its rhythm again. Her company, Hale Vision, no longer measured its success in profit margins or press releases, but in the number of lives it touched. The ballroom was filled with soft music and the murmur of conversation. It was the company's annual charity gala, this year dedicated to family wellness and community support programs. Banners lined the walls with pictures of smiling parents and children, and in the center of it all, a large sign read, "When we help each other, everyone rises." Victoria stood behind the curtain, taking a deep breath. Her daughter Grace stood beside her, now 10 years old, wearing a simple white dress. She held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes full of pride. "Ready?" Victoria asked softly. Grace smiled. "I'm proud of you, Mom." The words nearly broke her. 2 years ago, she was terrified her daughter would never call her mom again. Now, that single word meant everything. The host announced her name, and the audience broke into applause as Victoria stepped into the warm glow of the spotlight. She looked out at the sea of faces, and her gaze stopped near the middle of the crowd. There they were, Daniel and Mia Carter, the two people who had changed everything. Victoria adjusted the microphone, her voice steady but filled with emotion. 2 years ago, she began, I was sitting in a cold alley, soaked by the rain, my ankle broken, and my heart emptier than I ever realized. 7 people passed me that night. Only one man stopped. A single father, walking his daughter home after her dance class. The audience fell silent. You could almost hear the rain again, echoing in their imaginations. He didn't know who I was. He didn't care about my title or my company. He just saw a person in need, and that night changed my life. Hafi, she paused, her eyes glistening under the lights. I had spent years building success, chasing numbers, believing that power made me untouchable. But in that alley, I learned something different. I learned that true strength isn't measured by what you own, it's measured by what you give. She turned slightly toward Grace, who squeezed her hand. That man, Daniel Carter, showed me that being present matters more than being perfect. His daughter, Mia, reminded me that kindness doesn't ask who you are before it helps. They reminded me that humanity still exists, even in the darkest corners of the world. A soft ripple of emotion spread through the crowd. Some nodded. Others wiped their eyes. Victoria took another breath, her voice lower now, more intimate. Since that night, Hale Vision has changed. We now offer flexible hours for parents, support for single families, and community programs for anyone who needs a helping hand. Because I learned that success means nothing if you can't show up for someone who needs you. The spotlight widened. Daniel and Mia were visible now, sitting near the front. Mia had grown taller, but her smile was still the same. Daniel looked humbled, almost shy, as people began turning to see them. Victoria smiled down at them. You taught me what wealth truly means, she said softly. It isn't in your bank account. It's in the hands you hold when life gets dark. The audience rose in a standing ovation. The applause thundered through the hall, but all Victoria could hear was the sound of her daughter laughing beside her. Grace leaned in and whispered, You did it! Mom! Victoria bent down and kissed her forehead. No, sweetheart, we did it. From his seat, Daniel looked up at the stage, his eyes meeting hers. There was no need for words. Gratitude passed silently between them, a promise that some connections never fade. Mia clapped with both hands high above her head, cheering so loudly that people around her laughed. As the music swelled, Victoria stepped down from the stage and walked through the crowd toward Daniel and Mia. People parted for her, but she moved slowly, deliberately, until she stood before the man who had once knelt beside her in the rain. Daniel rose, smiling. You've come a long way. So have you, she replied. Your daughter still saving the world? She's working on it, he chuckled. Victoria handed him an envelope. It's a letter of thanks. But more than that, it's an invitation. I want you to lead our new program, the Community Kindness Initiative. You started it without even knowing. Daniel hesitated, looking at her. You sure about this? She nodded. Completely. You taught me that kindness should be practiced, not preached. He smiled, shaking her hand. Then let's make it count. Grace hugged Mia tightly. Two children bound by a story they might never fully understand. Cameras flashed, lights shimmered, and for a moment, the world seemed softer. Later that night, when the hall was empty and the music had faded, Victoria stood by the window overlooking the city. The river reflected the stars, calm and golden. She thought about that first night, the cold, the fear, the loneliness, and how far she had come since then. A whisper escaped her lips. Thank you. Not to anyone in particular, just to life, to the storm that broke her open, to the strangers who stopped. Because sometimes, the greatest transformations begin the moment someone simply chooses to care. The story follows the life-changing journey of a powerful CEO named Victoria Hale and a humble single father, Daniel Carter, along with his young daughter Mia. One stormy night in Chicago, Victoria fell in a dark alley, unable to move. 7 people walked past her without stopping. Only Daniel and little Mia chose to help. That single act of kindness connected 2 completely different worlds and changed their lives forever. Victoria, once successful but lonely, began to rediscover what truly matters. She learned to live with honesty, to love without fear, and to become a real mother again. Daniel, an ordinary man with an extraordinary heart, reminded her that real strength is not measured by money or power, but by compassion and presence. 2 years later, Victoria returned to the stage not as a cold businesswoman, but as a warm and grateful woman who finally understood the meaning of humanity. This story is a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can transform a life. When we stop to care, we not only lift others but also heal something inside ourselves. If this story touched you, take a moment to hit like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps spread messages of empathy, love, and simple humanity in a world that often forgets how powerful kindness can be.